Hi, everybody, and welcome to Pinstripe People, a podcast on the New York Yankees, sponsored by FanDuel on the Believe Network. And today, Mike Lindsley, my co-host over there in Syracuse, who does not have his usual backdrop. I think Mike's getting his car fixed, he said, so he is transportable. It's great. What a world we live in, that he could just take his computer and go wherever. So he's in some room at a car dealership. And in the middle, and in the middle, we have the honor of having our first guest on the show since we started this a few weeks ago. He is Mike Vaccaro of the New York Post, longtime columnist at the Post, St. Bonaventure grad, and a good friend of mine and a good friend of Mike's. Mr. Vaccaro, thank you for joining us, my friend.
Sal, Mike, how are you guys doing today?
Doing well, man. Super happy to have you on. And, the book is so amazing, and it ties in George and Hal, and obviously the whole if George were alive stuff, I think, is picked up even more since you
never goes away.
Wrote it. It never goes away. And Sal, I'll let you open up the questioning here with Mike, but we both read it. It's amazing. The front, the back, the look, the read. It keeps you engaged. You don't want to put it down, which I know an author wants to hear. You just want to go and finish the whole thing at night. So Sal, lead us off.
Yeah, look, Mike, I mean, it's a great book. And as a huge Yankee fanatic as I am, I've read about 1 million books. I've actually written a couple on the Yankees myself. But what's great about a book like this and other books that I've read is I always learn something new whenever I read another Yankees book. But this one in particular, because, Mike, you got so deep into the Steinbrenner legacy, and I learned things that I did not know. And believe me, I'm someone who pays attention to the history, and that's what I took away from the book itself, was the things that I learned that I didn't know. So that I want to commend you on that, but maybe take us through the process of how it all began and why you thought this was the time to do a book about really the Steinbrenner ownership and legacy.
Thanks for those kind words, Sal, and Mike, I appreciate it also. And if you want to keep saying how great you like the book, that's awesome too. An author never, Sal, as you know, an author never minds it. If you want to just like go hours at a time about what a great reader was. No, I appreciate that. Well, look, I had written 3 books within a 5-year period about 15 years ago, which I do not recommend to anybody. I mean, it was wonderful to write all 3 of those books, but it's a grind. I mean, writing a book is a grind. Sal, you know this.
It is. It is.
And so I took some time off. I wanted to focus on my day job. I wanted to become, the best sports columnist I could be. And I just wanted to focus my energies on that. And, about a couple of years ago, I'm like, I think I'm ready to get back in the game. And it was a matter of figuring out a subject, that was worthy of being preserved between the cover of a book. And through an agent of mine, also a St. Bonaventure guy named Joe Perry, we got together with Sean Desmond, an editor at HarperCollins, and he had this idea about there was maybe ripe to do a Steinbrenner book, and it really kind of hit me in a really interesting place because I spent a lot of time doing this job, Sal and Mike, as you know, and I always hear every time the Yankees go on a 4-game losing streak, I not only get to be entertained by Sal on Twitter, but I get to, my email gets inundated with Yankees fans. What would it be like if George were here? If George were still alive, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. And I find it funny that, for different reasons, either people are too young to remember or they just choose to remember a certain version of George. But, the version of George that a lot of people kind of think about now is the kindly, avuncular old man who would walk into Yankee Stadium and just be cheered and chanted, "Thank you, boss," whenever he walked in there. And, of course, you guys, certainly, Sal, you remember that it wasn't that long before that when he'd walk into the same building and the noise would be just as loud, but the words would be different and the sentiment was different.
Exactly.
And people don't remember that. And look, that's winning is not only a great deodorant, but it's a great amnesia agent. And so I just thought the time was right, 16 years after he died, to kind of revisit what that era was like. And I wasn't interested in doing a biography. There's been plenty of biographies done about him. Dick Schaap wrote one when he was still alive. That was very good, very entertaining. Bill Madden wrote sort of the definitive, soup to nuts biography on George just before he passed in 2010. There was no need to revisit that. I don't think. I didn't necessarily want to go to high school with George and but I wanted to write about his time with the Yankees, or the Steinbrenner family's time with the Yankees, especially because it's ongoing, and of course very different now under Hal, and Hal is very different than George, and so that's what I did, and I just kind of dove deep into it. You're also talking about a shorter period of time as opposed to going back to 1930 when George was born. I really just started the book on January 3rd, 1973, which is when George and his ownership group officially bought the team. George for a princely sum of $168,000 of his own money, which is something that he'll be teaching in business schools until the end of time. Yeah. And look, it was a time of, he became this flamboyant, over the top, larger than life personality. Some of it good, a lot of it bad, a lot of in between. And to me, that's what, like I said, I was looking for a subject that was worthy of being preserved between the covers of a book. And George Steinbrenner and the Steinbrenner family and their association with the Yankees, which now spans, over 50 years, certainly was a worthy candidate for that.
Mike, with the way the game is today, the big money, the big contracts, the enormous TV deals, all that stuff that George, a lot of what he did, you can see now in the game today. It's also developed into these monster cable television channels. Yes, SNY. And now we all of a sudden have a home run derby on Netflix, and we have all these different things. We open the season on Netflix. So 2-part question, George Steinbrenner today, how do you think he would approach buying a team today with the big money already there, number one, and number two, how that TV streaming and all that stuff builds into it, and what he would think of that in terms of how he approached buying a team, because that was a big deal for him, the MSG part into the Yes Network and all that. How would those two things come together if he were alive today, starting what he did way back then, buying the Yankees for, a chump of change?
Well, I'll start my answer this way. A lot of people, it's really funny, the personality traits people try to ascribe to George, right? I remember people when during the end game of the A-Rod saga, people were like, well, George would never have treated his best player that way. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Have you never heard of Dave Winfield and Howie Spira? Yeah. I mean, the man lost 2 years of his baseball career because he was blackmailing his best player. Get your brain around that. That's right. That's who George Steinbrenner was. Of course he would have assailed Alex Rodriguez. It's the same way when people like to tell me now, oh, George would never have allowed all these games on Amazon and Netflix. I mean, he'd think it was outrageous. I'm like, what world do you live in? This is the guy who invented basically the local sports network by handing over the Yankees' rights to MSG for $500 million and basically taking all of his free games off Channel 11, except for a handful every year. So of course he would have. So yeah, when we talk about the perceptions of George, I mean, those are two biggies. But I mean, the thing of it is, honestly, it's funny because he kind of reversed the process when he got the team, because now all we have are these monolithic corporations, which they have nominal heads, but they're basically just comprised of these conglomerates that own everything and have unlimited resources. The Dodgers are that way, the Blue Jays are that way. Just about every team that gets bought is bought by somebody like that, because those are the only, with rare exceptions, there aren't a lot of Steve Cohens around who have $15 billion in spare change in their pockets. And certainly George did not, as we know by his original investment. But he did that in 1973. He bought the team from CBS, which was the ultimate monolith, the ultimate faceless, BlackRock corporation. So it was actually reversed. I'm not so sure that he would be able to do that now. As successful as George was as a businessman, and he was a multimillionaire, but you can't be a multimillionaire and be an owner. You have to be liquid.
Not anymore.
You got to be Steve Cohen. You got to be Pagula. I mean, you got to be guys who literally have money as their wallpaper, and George didn't have that. And even all the rich friends that he put together to make that conglomerate happen. Look, I mean, think about this way. Two things when he bought the team from CBS. One thing, CBS sold the Yankees for a loss, which is hilarious. There's been two teams that have been sold for a loss since about 1920 or so. One of them was the Cardinals. It was because their owner was in some legal difficulties, and they sold for a small loss, but not a lot. I mean, CBS spent $13 million for the team in 1964 and sold it for $10 million 9 years later. I mean, think about that.
That's incredible.
The only team in the last 70 years that's been sold for loss is the New York Yankees. I mean, it's preposterous.
It is.
But there was a perfect storm there. Now, George's group of bid about $10 million, later on with refunds with the Yankee Stadium parking garage, it wound up being a total of about 8.8, which is even more amazing. But CBS and William Paley, the legendary chairman, already knew that part of his obituary was going to be that he let the Yankees go sideways while CBS owned the team. He did not want to be known as the guy who let the Yankees skip town. And the fact of the matter is that in 1973, the Yankees had one foot out the door, either for New Jersey or New Orleans was building the Superdome, and there was a lot of rumblings about the New York Yankees becoming the New Orleans Rebels or something down there. And the Yankees were the clear number 2 team in this town. I mean, the Mets outdrew them 2.5-1. They were the dominant team by far, the more successful team over the previous 5 or 6 years. The Yankees were in trouble, and the highest bidder was Lehman Brothers, a group put together by Lehman Brothers, and they offered about $13 or $14 million. George's group offered 10, but George offered a promise to Paley that he was going to keep the Yankees in New York, despite all the problems of that building and that neighborhood in that moment. And that's what won the day. That's what carried the day with Bill Paley. It's why he got the team. And of course, it's ironic that about 15 minutes later, George started his own 25-year dalliance with New Jersey too, in an effort to get what he ultimately got, which was a new ballpark. But he did. Of all the things you can say about George Steinbrenner is that he rescued the team in New York. But to go back to your original question, I mean, I don't think a guy like George Steinbrenner would be able to get into the fraternity anymore, just because there's the entry point is so profoundly different. We can talk about inflation, this and that, but there's no correspondence between the $10 million that the Yankees were sold for in 1973 and the upwards of $10 billion they'd be able to fetch now, probably more if they put them on the market now. So that goes beyond inflation and all kinds of economic tables to the reality of the fact that it's funny. I'm going to use this term: the little guy can't get a break anymore in terms of becoming an owner, and George Steinbrenner, in a very narrow context, would be considered the little guy in that particular equation.
Yeah. What cracks me up, Mike, is, forever and forever, since George has died, really, every Yankees fan always seems to lean on the same bromide. What would George do if, right? All these things that have come up through the years since Hal took over. I always say to myself, just like you said earlier, guys, it wasn't always good with George Steinbrenner. George Steinbrenner lorded over an 18-year World Series drought, which was the longest in franchise history.
Right.
I mean, there was a lot of downtime when I was growing up. Right?
Everyone's gaining out of this. I know you know that well too, Sal, but that's true. I mean, look, everybody wants to just wring their hands about, oh my God, it's been 17 years. Well, guess what? Your patron saint once oversaw an 18-year tenure. Look, I'm not here in any stretch to diminish the legacy of George Steinbrenner. Hell, I just wrote a book about it, but let's be very honest also. You guys both know this, right? As great as Steinbrenner was, as important as he was, as demanding an owner as he was, the Yankees had 2 eras of prosperity when he was the owner, and both times he was out of the picture, and that's the reason why they got good. Early in the 70s, he was suspended because of campaign contributions, and Gabe Paul built the bones of a championship team, and later on it was Stick Michael. And without that, George's legacy with the Yankees might be very different.
Yeah, exactly. So talk about, too, I want to move forward to Hal. I think a lot of people kind of misread Hal or don't understand what Hal's all about.
Sure.
And I don't consider myself one of those people. Mike Lindsley there constantly rails on Cashman, but I don't think he rails a whole lot on Hal, because Hal does spend money, guys. It's not like he's a cheapskate. They have a massive payroll. Their problem has been that they haven't always spent the money wisely, which I guess goes to Cashman. But tell us a little bit about Hal, what you learned, what that maybe you didn't know about him, and does he kind of get a bad rap that he doesn't maybe quite deserve?
Look, I mean, if the rap is because they haven't won championships, then of course it's well earned because they haven't. And look, I mean, the Yankees are a unique franchise in American sports because they've won so much. And you could explain away all the reasons why they've won through the eras. But the fact is they have that legacy, that record. It's why they're the Yankees, And I laugh. I mean, people like to say, oh, Yankee fans are spoiled. They're too demanding. They expect a championship every year. Well, guess why they do? Because the unofficial mission statement by the Yankees ever since January 3rd, 1973, is championship or bust. So if your owner feels that way, of course fans are entitled to feel that way. So I have no problem with Yankee fans expecting better than they've gotten, over the last 17 years. Even if you want to say relative to other teams in the sport or any sport, that, of course, they've done quite well for themselves over the larger, 30-year stretch. But Hal is a smart guy. George recognized Hal as a smart guy early. When Hal was about 12 years old, Burger King put out a series of trading cards. You get a Whopper, you get 5 Yankees cards. And Hal noticed right away, there's no Lou Piniella card in the series, which was interesting because Piniella was still an active player, still an important part of the team. And beyond that, he was George's favorite player. I mean, Piniella has, for a lot of years was considered kind of the third Steinbrenner son. He had that close of a relationship with Steinbrenner. And so Hal alerted his father to this, and his father, turned around, called Burger King and said, well, we can do one of two things. Either you'll issue, some emergency Lou Piniella cards this series, or I'll see you in court. And of course, Burger King did the prudent thing and issued about 5,000 Lou Piniella cards, all of which have become collector's items because there's a lot fewer of them than there are Reggie cards or whatever. And of course, Hal's got a couple of those, which he keeps carefully on his cowboy. One thing you didn't know about Hal, he's a baseball card collector. He loves baseball cards and collector. He's not looking to.
Right.
He probably doesn't need to use it as a side gig to turn a profit, given what his main job is. But he showed me when one of the times I interviewed him, he showed me the card that he has of that Piniella card. And, George recognized that, right? And he's a 12-year-old kid. Now, when George was having a lot of his difficulties, like when he was suspended from baseball the second time, Hal was too young still. He was still in college. Hank didn't really want to be part of the business, his older son. And I think that even George recognized Hank was a lot more like him, as Hank kind of proved later on, where he kind of became the front-facing spokesman for the Yankees for a couple of years and tried to kind of chat.
He was fun for you guys, wasn't he?
I mean, I loved Hank. I mean, I tell a story in the book. My editor called me one day and said, "What do you got for me today?" I said, "Boss, I'm a little dry today, so give Hank a call." And I said, "About what?" And he said, "About anything." And sure enough, Hank filled my notebook and I got a back page out of it, and that's what Hank was like. But even Hank tired of that. I mean, we're talking, after Hank retreated and before he sadly passed away, I talked to him one day and he said, "I don't know how my father did this." I said, "He did that for 37 years. He loved having his name in the paper. It wore me out after 2 years. I don't know how you can do that." And look, Hal is very different than that. Whether you want to say it's genetic, that he takes after his mother, or that he's learned from the sins of his father. Certainly patience is a virtue that his father did not have, and that Hal has certainly in abundance. And I think that's something that when people try to judge Hal harshly, it's like, well, they say, if George is still alive, Aaron Boone wouldn't be the manager anymore. And I say, he probably would be. He'd just be on his third tenure,
Exactly.
which is what he did a lot with managers back in the day, not just Billy Martin pretty famously, but Lou Piniella was here multiple times, and Bob Lemon was here multiple times, and Gene Michael was here multiple times. I have no doubt that if Dick Hauser had lived and not died tragically at age 50, he'd probably have been recycled a couple of times after the fact. So that's what George did. And it's a different game. I know there's no word that drives Yankee fans insane more than the word crapshoot. And here's an interesting little New York Post story for you, right? People go crazy. Cashman always says it's a crapshoot. So Dan Martin, who's one of our baseball writers, said, he says, like, you have this magic with archives. Can you find at all the first time Brian Cashman ever used the word crapshoot in relation to the playoffs? I'm like, sure, I can find out, I can absolutely do that. So I went through it. And it turns out he's actually literally never said the word. Now, a couple of times, Hal has said, well, as Brian always says, it's a crapshoot. Brian has said things that would indicate that he believes it's a crapshoot. As we did some more reporting on it, we realized, part of the reasons why Joe Torre fell out of favor late in his tenure is because he used that word a lot. And Cashman saw the backlash to Torre using it. Nobody liked to hear the Yankees ever talk about that. It's anybody's game. Why, it could be us or anybody else. And so Cashman had to, kind of learn from that and really didn't want to have his name associated with that word. And later on, Darren actually went on talking to Brian. He's like, "Hey, you're kind of right. That's kind of what I said. I know I didn't think I've ever said it because I don't really like the word, but obviously, whether he said the word or not, the fact of the matter is it's true. We think of the Dodgers being this unbeatable, unassailable team, right? Last year in the World Series, they should have lost at 3 different times.
They should have lost.
They should have lost the Padres in the playoffs. They've had opportunities because you know why? Because baseball's a crapshoot. Now, look, if you're the Dodgers and you have a lot of answers for the problems that put you in peril, maybe you'll prevail. And that's what the Yankees certainly used to be about. And look, I think one of the great gross misperceptions of certainly the latter-day Yankees, look, was George afraid to spend money? He was not. Was he afraid to go after every big-name player there was? Of course he wasn't. But he also, when you look back at those teams, 96 through 2000, 2001, even if you want to include that team, I think the best example of that is the 98 team won 125 games. If it's not the best team of all time, it's in the short conversation. And what player had a dominant year that year? None of them did. None of them had career years that year, but they had a career team year as a team because they were that way. I mean, I drew a lot of parallels between the Yankees team and this year's Knicks team, which wasn't it was great at regular season team, but obviously was a juggernaut in the playoffs. And the thing of it is, when the Knicks did what they did, I mean, every day when you look, Jalen Brunson's the guy and Cat's number 2. But I mean, when you go back and you look at the playoffs, there was a Deuce McBride game, there was a Landry Shamet game, there was even a Jordan Clarkson game. I mean, everybody had their moment, had their big moment. There was a Mikal Bridges game. That's what I remember the '98 Yankees being. Every now and again you say, oh gosh, what are we going to do? And here comes Shane Spencer. Oh God, what are we going to do? Here comes, Ramiro Mendoza. I mean, that's what it was like on that team. That team was not the highest payroll team in their own division. The Orioles were that year. So, think about that for a second, right? So, yeah. I think a lot of times people ascribe things to George that aren't necessarily fair, even to him, because, the fact of the matter is when they won the World Series in '96, that came after him announcing before that season that they were officially in austerity. Well, they won the World Series and you never heard that word again. But the fact of the matter is that, he wasn't always the guy who wanted to be known as the guy who spent every dollar. And in fact, even when he built the team early, he was not the highest bidder for Reggie Jackson. He wasn't the highest bidder for Catfish Hunter. He wasn't the highest bidder for Goose Gossage. They didn't, it's different now. Juan Soto was going to get every nickel he could. Most free agents are that way. I'm not singling out Juan Soto. Most free agents today are going for the highest bidder because they feel like they have to do it, in service to other players, for the market value, in service to their agents who work on their behalf, whatever. In those days, George knew that you could sell different things to players like New York City, like being a Yankee. Being a Yankee is what sold Catfish Hunter. Doing his thing in New York is what sold Reggie Jackson. Being a part of a champion is what sold Goose Gossage. And, try selling that, as your lead item when you're recruiting your free agent now. It's not going to work. It's just a different world.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Major bookstores online where you can get it as well. Right here, The Bosses of the Bronx. Our author guest is Mike Vaccaro. And I know, Sal, we're going to get to the second half real quick here too. But, Mike, I just had one more on the book. The Hal, Cashman, Boone thing is what it is. I'll leave it at that. That trio, though, Boone seems real safe. Cashman seems real safe. We know Hal's not doing anything with the team. I mean, how indefinite is this? Is this going to go on forever here, this trio? It seems like they're in and that's it. And obviously everybody knows it's something that worries me.
I think I'm getting this right. I think Cashman's been the GM for 28 years, and they've made the playoffs in 24 of those years.
Right.
And I get it. Okay. You can minimize what it means to make the playoffs in baseball now because the playoffs are expanded and all this stuff.
Everybody goes.
Ask your friends who are Mets fans if they would take half that. Ask your friends who were Dodgers fans before this little push how easy it was to make the playoffs every year in Los Angeles, or Chicago, or Philadelphia.
Just get in the crapshoot.
I get it. I mean, I think that's why people just assume that's his terminology, because the fact of the matter is there is something to be said for being good every year. It's not easy to sustain that at that level. And even when the Yankees rebuild, I mean, a rebuilding season, a couple of years ago was 82-80. I mean, not a great season by any stretch, but we're not talking about a 75-87 team either. And we're not talking about the teams that George left behind after he got suspended the second time when they were in last place with Mel Hall as your best player. So I think that Hal appreciates the idea that his team is in play every year. They're in play because they usually have at least as many good players as everybody else. They're partly in play because I think they both believe in Aaron Boone. I know Aaron Boone drives a lot of Yankees fans crazy, but the fact of the matter is, you look at his record, and people want to minimize the record because, well, look who he gets to manage. Well, it's one or the other. I mean, it doesn't matter who the manager is, or maybe this manager is doing a good job. And so, look, I mean, and the fact is, as I said before, I mean, the standard here is just different. I don't even think the Celtics have the same standard in the NBA. I think the Celtics, want to be generational team that is always competitive. But there's not this demand that if they don't win the NBA championship, it's a failed year, as it is with the Yankees. And I think that's the chasm now, I think the one misperception with Hal as regards to that, I mean, yes, is he patient with those guys? He is. I think he appreciates the fact they've done good work for him. And I think he does appreciate more than a lot of Yankee fans the fact that they are in October every year, and that should matter for something. The difference between him and his father, he exemplified this. Mike, I've told you this story before. Sal, if you read the book, you saw this, I think. He said, the difference between me and my father is that, like, I'll watch a Yankees game, we'll make an error in the ninth inning, lose a tough game. I'll throw my shoe at the TV. I'm pissed off. That's maybe, don't tell me I don't care. My father would watch the game. There'd be an error in the ninth inning. He'd throw a shoe at the TV. And then what he would do is he would pick up the phone and he'd call up Phil Pepe at the Daily News or Maury Allen at the New York Post. And then he'd have 5 days of back pages on it. And that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Hal's not going to give us back. Hal's been in charge for almost 20 years now. Hasn't given me one back page. His brother gave me 5. His old man, kept me in business for many years and kept, a lot of other people like me in business. He lived for the back page. That's not the way Hal is, not how he does business. And he'll, look, I mean, you can say it's wrong, but that's not who he is. I mean, I stood next to the man when they won the pennant in Cleveland a couple of years ago, finally get to the World Series. And I've never seen a guy more thrilled, but he was thrilled by himself. The players were going crazy on the field and in the clubhouse. They were showering each other with champagne. There's a million pictures of George, certainly when he was Hal's age. The Yankees would win in 77 or 78 or win the division in 1980. And George in the middle of the champagne celebration, man. It's like he was the captain of the team, not just the owner. You'll never see Hal do that. That's just to me, that's a picture postcard example of how the two men are different.
All right, we are sponsored by FanDuel, and tonight, you don't see this too often, guys, but the money line for Yankees-Dodgers tonight is even, -108. I'm not a gambler, Mike. I'm not even sure what all that means, but that's what the money line says. You've got Roki Sasaki going for the Dodgers against Garrett Cole. So, using that as the segue, Yankees have 66 games to go, Mike. 4 games behind the Rays in the loss column. What do we expect, Mike Vaccaro, from this Yankee team moving forward, irrespective of what might happen at the trade deadline? Is this team the team that can chase that Rays team down and pass them?
Of course they are. I mean, I think they're a more talented team than the Rays, even diminished. Now the Rays are. The Rays are a model franchise, and I know that a lot of Yankee fans just have this real stone in their shoe for the Rays, but they just do things the right way. They are a model operation. They're not always in the top of the division, but they're there a lot. And given their resources and everything else, it's remarkable. I mean, they have a terrific manager, on and on. They just don't have as many horses as the Yankees do, even diminished. They're playing better than them now, but it's a long season. And it's really interesting. I think the Yankees were down 7.5 games in May, then they were up 5.5, and now they're whatever they are, 4.5 or 3.5 back. I think they're better than the Rays. I think over the course of the next 72 games that could be borne out. Maybe it won't be, but I mean, again, once you get to October, I wouldn't worry about the Yankees having to play pick your other team in the American League in the first round of the playoffs with 3 games at home. I think that's fine. And then you're just into the regular levels of baseball in the playoffs. And look, I mean, if things break right for the Yankees, they're going to have 4 at least. At the beginning of the season, I would have said 5 with Heel, but I don't know what you're ever going to find from him. But the other 4 guys are legit. Might be aces on other team pitchers, and some are. I think they rotate who the aces on this staff, especially when Cole is at his best. And you have those 4 going into the playoffs. I'll take my chances on that. And I'll take my chances on the guys like Warren and Weathers who have had their moments this year as starters. Going to the bullpen, strengthening the bullpen, especially the part of the bullpen which has been the problem, the kind of the middle and the long relief part of it. So I'll take that. Even if Judge got bad news over the break and he reveals that today, which I mean, who knows what that's going to be. I still think they have more horses to get through the American League. And if they get Judge back, then obviously it's like making the greatest possible deadline trade whenever he comes back, because he's still, one of the 2 or 3 best players in the sport, offensively anyway. So look, I mean, I think I don't want to say don't watch the rest of the season because we'll see in October, but I mean, I really believe that. I mean, and even if they don't, overcome the Rays, they've got, there's not 5 teams in the sport that are better than them, and in that league that are better than them. You look around the American League, it's preposterous how bad that league is. So, and they'll be there. And, then it's a matter of taking care of their business. They're generally like basically they had the same thing 2 years ago. People wanted to criticize they had this easy ride through the American League Central. Well, you know what? Somebody, those teams got there somehow. They beat somebody. And so, I don't play that game. It really annoyed me when people wanted to minimize what the Knicks did this year. And all they did was win the title. You play who you play. And I think once they get to the American League playoffs, they'll be fine. Look, the National League could be a problem because I think there's 3 or 4 teams in that league that are better than them. The Dodgers being one, the Brewers being one, the Cubs being one, the Braves and Phillies. I mean, whoever emerges from there is probably good. I mean, I'm personally looking forward to the Yankees-Cubs World Series because Sal might dissolve in a spontaneous burst of combustion.
Yankees are 1A, Mike, always 1A. I'll be a Yankees reader if that happens.
I just had to throw that one in there.
I remember back in 1938 it was a problem, but
you didn't know who to root for, Charlie Root or Babe Ruth back in 32.
Exactly, yeah.
So look, I think the Yankees are going to be fine. And I wrote this today. I mean, I think that this is an intriguing series for the Yankees because look, they get a chance to test themselves against the best team in baseball, 2-time defending champion. The Dodgers are a game and a half ahead of the rest of the pack. I mean, they're the gold standard right now. Let's see what they can do. Let's see if Cam Schlittler, when he pitches on Sunday, can throw 7 strong. Let's see if Bellinger and Rice, who were scuffling in the weeks before the All-Star game, had kind of found their bats against that preposterous bullpen in Washington, and then carried it over to the All-Star game. Let's see if they can bring that to the Bronx, because obviously, part of people want to talk about this and that and all the things that are troubling them. Well, I think part of the problem, big part of the problem, is that Cody Bellinger was what, 4 for 70 at one point, and I think Goldschmidt was 0 for 34 at one point. And look, I mean, when your hitters stop hitting, that's a problem no matter who you are. So, I mean, I think they're going to be just fine. I'm really interested in seeing these games this weekend. Obviously, everybody is, because there's 3 night games, and you almost never get 3 night games when it comes to the Yankees in the Bronx. They like their Saturday and Sunday afternoon games, but when they play the Dodgers, there was no chance those games are being played in the daylight. So, because people want to see it, and they should want to see it, because whether it's a World Series preview or not, it's certainly a preview of 2 teams who are going to be in the World Series hunt, and that makes it interesting. And I likened it to there was a game the Knicks played on March 1st against the Spurs. At a time when the Spurs were really ascendant, the Knicks were kind of doing their regular season scuffle dance, and the Knicks blew them out. And it was, I don't think you necessarily thought what happened would happen there, but you thought maybe the Knicks would be better than they'd shown. And look, I think if the Yankees take 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers, I mean, I think we're going to feel a lot differently about them than even we feel now. And look, there's really not a lot to feel bad about. They're coming off a 4-game winning streak going into the second half, so that's not a bad place to be either.
Mike, you got anything else for Mike Vaccaro?
I'm set. Everybody go buy the book, The Bosses of the Bronx. It's unbelievable. Online where books are sold, major bookstores, you name it. Mike Vaccaro, the terrific writer of the New York Post. And you can follow Mikey all over social media as well, and catch us in Cooperstown as well on July 30th for a pinstripe panel. Let's call it that, right?
Sure.
We'll be in the Hall of Fame Library.
You
got some people coming. I got a few people coming. I heard from last night who are going to stop down there and hang around Main Street and head into the Hall of Fame and join that as well. And you can catch that post on Mike's channels and my channels as well. Sal, Mike, thank you so much. Again, the book right here, proof positive. It's amazing between Sal and I, and a lot of awesome quotes on the back cover, how good it is as well. It's called Bosses of the Bronx. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Mike, I'm gonna put a link to your Amazon page in the show notes here, and I got to tell you too, I love Bosses of the Bronx. Two of your other books are 2 of my favorite books I've ever read. Emperors and Idiots is all about the 2003-2004 Yankees Red Sox battles. I loved that book, and I loved 1941, The Greatest Year in Sports.
Yeah,
those are 2 of my favorite books.
41 was a fun book to do, guys. I mean, it was just, I'm going to be partial to this book because it's done so well, and I do like the book a lot. I do think this book is probably my best, but until this book came out, 41 was my baby because it was a pet project, and it's I don't read a lot of my books afterward. After I've done, when
I never read mine after.
Yeah, when you write a book, you've already read it 15 times. You just can't do it anymore. I actually did a couple of years ago, sat down and read 1941, tried to do it through kind of objective eyes. And it was, I was very proud of that book. I still remain very proud of that.
Yeah, hey, that's a problem I'll never have. I'll never have to read my own book.
All right. I want to thank my co-host, Mike Lindsley, as always, and our special guest, Mike Vaccaro, from the New York Post. Again, I'll have the show in the show notes, a link to Mike's Amazon page to get his latest great book, Bosses of the Bronx. Mike, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you. I don't know. You coming to town when the Bills play the Jets? I hope I'm going to see you at some point.
There's a good chance I'll be there. I want to see good football. So sometimes you got to venture to Buffalo to see it. And I want to see the new stadium too. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. If you get there, you're gonna really be impressed.
Yeah,
all right, guys, we're gonna.
You did out in Rich Stadium last year. Some of those, I did not grow up a Bills fan, but when I read your words, it makes me feel like I grew up in Orchard Park or someplace.
Thanks, I appreciate it. That was a fun project. All right, folks, we're gonna wrap it up. Mike and I will be back Monday when we wrap up Dodgers Yankees. I'm hoping I'm in a good mood that day, Mike, but I have a feeling I probably won't be. We'll see. But anyways, thanks for being here at Pinstripe People.